Hello Year 8. This lesson is all about measuring your heart rate. You need to turn to page 29 in your the Oxygen Molecule booklets, and the objective today is to learn to investigate our heartbeat or pulse. So you may have seen doctors on TV or nurses measuring people's heart rate. You may have even done it yourself, okay? The average heart beats approximately 70 times a minute for 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year for the rest of your life to keep you alive. You're going to have a go at measuring your resting pulse rate 3 times. Your teacher will show you how, and you're going to calculate your average resting pulse rate. Why do you think we measure our pulse rate 3 times? Why don't we just rely on it just once? So have a little think. We'd like to think that each time we take our resting pulse rate, that they are similar each time. This makes our data reliable that we collect. If we have one result that is a little bit unusual, that is a little bit too high or too low, we would ignore this result. It would be considered an anomaly, and we would calculate our average resting pulse rates using the other data we have, or we would repeat it again. So I want you to take your resting pulse rate 3 times, write them into the boxes, and then calculate your average, so divide by 3. To do this, if you take 2 fingers and rest them gently on your wrist, you are trying to feel for the push of blood through your blood vessels. Do not use your thumb to measure your pulse rate, okay, because there is a slight pulse in your thumb. If you struggle to find your pulse in your wrist, then you can find it in your neck. The easiest way to do is again take 2 fingers, not your thumb again. Find where your jawline is, where the sharp kind of like square part of your jaw. Place your 2 fingers gently on your neck, do not press hard, and turn your neck into your fingers so that it puts a little bit of pressure onto the fingers and you can feel the pulse. This may take you a few attempts to try and find this. Some people find their pulse very, very quickly, whereas with others it takes a little bit more time and more of their technique. So hopefully you've filled in your resting pulse rates and then you've divided by 3. What I then want you to do is a little bit of a numeracy task to try and find out how many times roughly your pulse would, your heart would beat per hour, per day, per week and per year. So in order to work out your pulse rate per hour, take your average resting pulse rate and you're going to times it by 60 minutes because you took your pulse rate in 1 minute and I want to know how many times it beats in an hour, and in an hour there are 60 minutes. Show your workings at the side, so there's plenty of space on page 29 to do this. I do not want you to use a calculator. I want you to use long multiplication if you can, please. Once you've got your pulse rate for per hour, we know that there are 24 hours in a day. So you would write whatever your pulse rate is from here per hour, you would put that into this box. And to work out your pulse rate per day, you would multiply this by 24. To work out your pulse rate per week, because this is for 1 day and we know that there are 7 days in a week, so you put this number into here, you times it by 7, and that will give you your pulse rate per week. We know that there are 52 weeks in a year, so the last calculation, we take this number, we put it into here and we multiply by 52. So see if you can figure out what your resting pulse rate might be per hour, per day, per week and per year. Turn over to page 30. So this is a quick recap of what is meant by a double circulatory system. In this diagram, we can see a really simplified diagram of the heart in the middle. They have coloured in red on the left-hand side. Remember, this is the left side of the heart and this is the right, okay, because the heart is always drawn as if it is in your body. And they've coloured this left-hand side all red to denote what we call oxygenated blood. In other words, blood that has lots of oxygen in it. And they've coloured the right-hand side in blue to denote deoxygenated blood. In other words, blood that has very little oxygen in it. So remember I said in the first lesson on heart structure that sometimes diagrams show the blood vessels come out nice and neatly in at the sides and out at the top, okay? Obviously this is not how the blood vessels normally are in the heart, but it's done to make it simpler for you to understand and for you to see the route of the blood. So let's say we're starting at the lungs, where the blood has picked up the oxygen in the alveoli and it has become oxygenated. So we're going to be starting here. This oxygenated blood is going to be coming down into the heart, and this blood vessel, remember we said, was called the pulmonary vein. And it comes in from both the left and the right side of the lungs into the left side of the heart. We have our top chamber, our left atrium, just here. We have our valve, our bicuspid valve here. We have our left ventricle, and then blood is being squeezed. As this muscle squeezes here, it's going to force the blood out through the semilunar valves, out of the heart through the aorta. And this is going to take our oxygenated blood, okay, to the head and body, not just the body, the head and body. So this is a huge big loop. It would split up, okay? It's not just one blood vessel going all around your body. And as we can see, it's got high oxygen and low carbon dioxide. The head and the body would use the oxygen for respiration. And so in respiration, we know that carbon dioxide is made and oxygen is used up. So now our blood contains very little oxygen and more carbon dioxide. So in order for it to get some more oxygen, it's got to go to the lungs, but it's got to get there first. So it comes in through this vein here. This is called the vena cava, coming from both the head and the body into the right side of the heart, into the right atrium, through our tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle, through the semilunar valves, and it leaves to go off to the lungs by the pulmonary artery. Remember, arteries go away from the heart. It has got low oxygen levels but high CO2 at this point, so it's going to go back into the lungs, okay, where it's going to pick up oxygen. So you have got one red blood cell is going to make a loop of the heart through here, and then it's going to return back to the heart to go back to the lungs. So on one journey around the body, a single red blood cell would pass through the heart twice, once with oxygen and once without, okay? So I want you to start in the left atrium. Put your finger on the left atrium and use your finger to trace the journey around the double circulatory system. Remember we said the heart is really two pumps. The left side pumps oxygenated blood to the head and the body, and we call that the systemic system. And the right side pumps deoxygenated blood back to the lungs to pick up more oxygen, and we call that the pulmonary system. So you have this diagram, and you can see that the blood vessels are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. So number 1 is starting over here. Remember, this is our vena cava, and it's bringing in deoxygenated blood, as we can see, into the right atrium, through that tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle, and it's going to leave the body, okay, by this one, number 4. This is the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary because it's going to the lungs to pick up oxygen. Artery because it's travelling away from the body. So the capillaries in the lungs surrounding the alveoli, they are going to pick up the oxygen. So this is C is labelled as the lung capillaries surrounding all those little air sacs, those alveoli. 3 is our blood vessel that's going to bring the oxygenated blood now back into the heart by the pulmonary vein, into the left atrium, can't see that against red, left atrium, through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, and he's going to be squeezed out through this main artery called the aorta to go to the head and body. So this part is what we call the systemic system. So A is the capillaries of the body organs, so the head and the body, and they drop their oxygen off, and then we come all the way back round to the vena cava again. So make sure you've labelled up the blood vessels 1, 2, 3 and 4 on your diagram as they are here. So it's 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay. Pause the video and you have a couple of questions to answer at the bottom of page 30. So, what does the blood collect at the lungs? Oxygen. It drops off at the lungs carbon dioxide. It drops off oxygen and glucose or sugar to the cells in the body for respiration. And it takes away carbon dioxide, water and a little bit of waste chemical that makes up your urine called urea. So you're going to go on to your piece of creative writing next. You're going to produce a piece of recount text on the journey of a red blood cell around the circulatory system. Just a few reminders about what needs to be included in recount text. Because it's an extended piece of writing, we need to make sure that we have capital letters to start sentences, that we have full stops to finish them, that we have appropriate punctuation where required. So if we're doing speech, we might use speech marks, we might use commas, we might use a colon or a semicolon, okay? We need to make sure that it's not one big long paragraph, that we have sections splitting it up into separate paragraphs. We need, first of all, a hook at the start of our story to get people interested in what we're writing about. We need to have, because it's a recount text, some time connectives. We need to think about where our journey is going to start and where it's going to end. So we're going to use the diagram on the opposite page, page 30 to start with. We're going to start with number 1 and go around the body, okay, in the correct order. So it would go 1, 4, 3, 2, and then back to 1 again, okay? So time connectives, starts and ends, okay, where your journey is going to start and ends. We want some description, and most of all, we want it to be fun, okay? So the task is, imagine you are a red blood cell. You can give yourself a name if you like. You can call yourself Robbie. You can call yourself Rebecca. You can call yourself Matthew. You can call yourself anything you like, okay? Using recount text, describe your journey around the double circulatory system. I want to know the names of the blood vessels and the chambers. So this is where the correct science comes in. And I want them in the correct sequence. So think about it, if you like, to help you start, okay, so when you're doing your draft, okay, your rough copy of this, you might want to think about where you're starting and write the names in order. So whether it's left atrium, bicuspid valve, left ventricle, aorta, off to head and body, think about the order you're going to write them, okay? And I want to know the correct sequence as you pass from body cells to the heart. So starting off, body cells taking the oxygen to the heart, back to the lungs and returning then to the body cells from the heart. So think about where you start for that journey, okay? As I said, you can use speech in your recount text, okay? You can describe what it might be like for you as a red blood cell. So the only thing I can kind of imagine as an analogy for it is if you've been to the LC2, okay, on the slides, you would be like a red blood cell flowing through the blood vessels, okay, of the slides at the LC2, okay? So think about what it might look like, okay, what colours you will see. You could have conversations with fellow red blood cells on your journey. Make it interesting. I want to read these stories and make sure that not only have you got the correct science, but you've got some interesting, fun stories, okay, to tell me. Thank you very much, Year 8.